You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast coming to you from Montecito, California. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something that is on the horizon. In the latest surge of technological evolution, one titan stands out, reshaping our landscape with the silent swiftness of a revolution. Artificial intelligence. It's a term that sparks a spectrum of emotion. It's exhilarating, the dawn of a new era, to trepidation about the unknowns it brings along. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about it that way. The funny thing is I was using ChatGPT specifically to try to see if it could mimic me. So I put in, use the voice of Buck Joffrey to create an introduction on artificial intelligence so that I can introduce the show for this week. And as you can tell, it's not perfect, right? Because that doesn't really sound like me at all. But it is what it is. It sounds there's a lot of descriptive terms and everything there that made it sound very important. But that being said, we're going to talk about this because it's a very, very important space to be in. I have not figured out how to invest in it. There has to be a way to. But, and whoever figures out, apart from maybe trying to, essentially do the tech play where you're investing in Microsoft and, and maybe in Google and some of these other things, I haven't really figured out how to really do that. But I think it's important to just kind of understand the big play here, the big vision, so that you can, keep an eye out for it, because that's when you, if you're actually looking for, opportunities, that's when you're most likely to find them. This week, we have a really interesting guy here to talk about artificial intelligence. And the reason I like this guy is because he has nothing to do with money. He is a true academic. So this week we have on Professor Russell Newman. He is a really interesting guy. He's a leading mind from NYU, one of the founders of the Media Technology Lab at MIT. He's got a really deep understanding of this space. He's not a guy who comes at this with any particular financial angle or anything, and that actually makes it more interesting, because you can look at this and try to see through the lens of this guy who's who's really looking at it as a place where there's going to be intersections of technology, media, and investment. Anyway, that's what we're going to talk about this week. When we come back, it is Professor Russell Newman.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Russ Newman. Russ is a professor of media technology at NYU, a founding faculty member of the MIT Media Laboratory. He served as senior policy analyst in the White House as well. And that was in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Russ, welcome to Wealth Formula Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk a little bit about, the title of your book actually is Evolutionary Intelligence, How Technology Will Make Us Smarter. And you previously had a book called The Digital Difference, Media Technology and the Theory of Communication Effects. But I do want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Obviously, you're one of those guys who's sort of at the forefront of this, professionals who've got their head down and who are just focusing on day-to-day activity like taking care of patients, or high-level manager jobs or whatever. Tell us what is this? What is the big deal about AI? What's coming down the pike that we are not necessarily seeing right now?
Well, why don't we start with trying to come up with an idea of how AI works, and start with the simplest example, and then try to understand how the phenomenon, particularly of the generative AI technologies, we can get into some of the details if there's interest in that.
Absolutely.
So basically, the notion that we can help humans make better decisions by designing a few algorithms. We used to call them expert systems, and Some of your viewers and listeners may be familiar with expert systems that were applied in various medical areas, where you take a bunch of rules that seem to be helpful for guiding a decision. Classic example is finding where in the environment we might find some oil buried under the ground. And what happened is three things. The capacity of what the AI folks call compute, that is computer power, the capacity to do very complex, very fast manipulations of formulas. The second thing was a very big database of human communication. So they've scraped billions of words from the internet, Wikipedia, the Twitter files, et cetera, to try to understand what people are talking about, including historical materials to understand the background. And the third, and this is what's got invented in the last couple of years, is some very new mathematical formulas for trying to make sense of millions of words with millions of calculations. So if you think about the simplest decision, it says, if it's raining, take the umbrella. If it's not raining, don't take the umbrella. And start to multiply that out. The expert systems maybe had 100 elements about what there was in the environment, make it more or less likely to find oil. What happened in the last 2 years is that's been ramped up to 180 billion. Now, when you go up to 100 or even to 1,000, we can sort of understand that. Maybe we can comprehend what it means if there are 10,000 rules. It's not likely that a human being could kind of calculate and look at 10,000 things. Human psychology says we can do 7. That's about the maximum the brain can handle at one point in time. When you get up to 180 billion decision points, these generative AI systems are able to predict the next word in a sentence, in fact, the next paragraph, and they begin to sound like humans responding to a question with a full paragraph or multi-paragraph answer. And these new applications, literally in the last couple of years, have ramped up to many orders of magnitude. I like to mention that the number of neurons in the human brain is about 89 billion. So if we get systems that look like they're acting human-like, we shouldn't be surprised. And if they're making mistakes, cutely called hallucinations, we shouldn't be surprised either.
Yeah. Now, those when you talk about that that number of decision-making processes, is that available? I mean, who's that available to right now? Is that just listen, I don't know much about this stuff, but I played around with Chat GPT, for example. I mean, what that in particular, that program doesn't necessarily have that 189 billion points, does it? Or does it?
Well, it's in the back end. When you do a search in Google, you don't see all of the different calculations that Google makes to find what would be optimized for you. And so nobody could make any sense of 180 billion numbers. So if you had access to it, I don't know what you would do with it as a human being.
Right. But I guess
so what you do is you throw probes at this system, and the system will respond. If you throw the same probe at the system twice, you're going to get a slightly different response. And what's going to be happening in the future, right now, since it costs many tens of millions of dollars to generate one of these systems, where it's scraping all of this gathered knowledge in the last 20 years, there are probably going to be the major players, the Googles, the OpenAI / Microsoft, Meta, and a few others. And what will happen is the specialists will take one of those engines and do some fine tuning, and then sell access to a version of the main engine that's been fine tuned to give answers that are more appropriate for example, the medical community.
Sure. You hear about these high profile individuals out there, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, who've also been giving quite a bit of, warnings about the potential of AI and all that. Should we be afraid of it?
We should be cautious. Any powerful technology, gunpowder, nuclear power. So when they say maybe we should be careful, we should take heed, indeed. But I think primarily the notion that Siri deep down wants to kill you is an anthropomorphic projection onto these technologies. We, as human beings, evolved in a competitive environment with other human beings and other animals for scarce resources in the jungles and the grasslands. And we sort of project that the computer next to us wants to eat our lunch, but in fact, the computer doesn't have much interest in our lunch, and we can relax about that part. Our lunch is safe.
Right, right. But on the other hand, there is, I guess the question is, if you have computers that are ultimately able to create so much information and decision-making process, I mean, at what point are they just making decisions independent of us, or is that not something that we should be worried about?
Well, it's something we should be cautious about. I don't know. The notion that they would be autonomous and making decisions on their own is something that would be an assigned task. It says, all right, here are the constraints among the following 5, optimize the order of the 5. Hopefully, then the humans would ultimately do the ultimate execution. In some minor cases, and it's certainly in the case of the driving of a car, those are real-time decisions that are executed by the intelligent system itself. People will note that there have been accidents, in fact, fatal accidents involving self-driving cars. I guess the question is, on a per-mile basis, with drunk Uncle Louie driving another car, what are the comparisons come out to? I don't know what the data is on that, but I'd want to raise that question before we condemn all self-driving cars for the fact that they did get involved in accidents.
How do you control for, or you can't control for, but how do you protect against, say, nefarious actors? Because that's the bigger danger of the technology, right? I mean, it's extremely powerful. And so it can be used for good things. It can be used for positive things, but obviously very negative things as well.
Yes. In fact, there's been discussion, and Sam Altman at OpenAI has even suggested quite strongly that there might be a federal agency of some kind that would focus on regulating AI. I'm strongly opposed to this. My notion is what I call the downstream strategy. If somebody uses a automobile or a gun to rob a bank, you don't regulate the automobile and the gun. You regulate the person that's for the crime and the person that's committed the crime. So don't go after the tools. It's true that these are powerful technologies, but I don't think they require special regulation just because they can be used by malevolent people.
When you think of, AI, one of the things that you had sort of alluded to was, the potential for using these to make decisions for humans, and do you see this in some way as sort of the next step in human evolution?
I do, and that's where the title of the book comes from. Basically, the underlying argument is that originally our tools made us stronger. Our communications technologies allowed us to communicate over great distances instantly and around the world. And finally, we come to a technology that's not used to move things, but in fact used to help us make decisions. So the argument is that this technology will make us smarter. And the interesting question is, will it lead to increased inequality or decreased inequality? And the answer is probably initially, when it takes special skills and perhaps extra money to get access to some of these technologies, there will be the usual tradition that the rich people got the color television sets first, and the shiny computers and cars first. But there's no reason that the average individual can't take advantage. The interfaces will be easy enough to use so that these technologies will not be only under the control of the wealthy.
The other very positive thing on this is I think about the applications of AI that are already sort of being used in medicine. The ability to quickly potentially identify vaccines for new viruses or antibiotics for drug-resistant bugs, and all sorts of things. How far along are we in that world right now? Is that something we're going to see? I mean, are we talking about next couple of years? Are we talking about decades? What's your take on that?
Well, that's a question I don't have a quick or clear answer to. Obviously, they're working on it. You'd mentioned the issue of pharmaceuticals. There's a whole other technology, generally summarized by the term quantum computing, where computational challenges for folding proteins challenges classical computing models. So it may be that the quantum side of things, which is more or less independent of the AI work, will end up being the real promising engine of quicker development in pharmaceuticals. People are working on it now. It's hard to predict.
Is it being used? Is it being used in medicine right now?
It is being used in medicine now, but quantum computing isn't yet at a practical stage. We have tens of qubits in computers, not millions of qubits yet. And when we get to the tens of thousands of qubits, we're going to start to see some pretty massive applications. I think when we get to quantum computing at room temperatures right now, because of quantum interference, we have super cooled environments where the quantum assessments are made. And it may be that using photonic computing rather than electrons will permit room temperature computation, and we can really start moving quickly in the domain of quantum applications.
What other areas do you see this probably coming to benefit humanity, sooner rather than later outside of medicine?
Well, I think the question, and that's why the book is posed the way it is, which is to say, let's try to define this as a augmentation of human intelligence. The original model coming from the 1950s, where people were trying to get funding to do this strange new thing called artificial intelligence, said our model is AGI, which is basically a notion of human level intelligence, artificial general intelligence. The notion that a visual computer could assess an environment and make sense of it, just as a small child could look and sort of get the lay of the land and understand what's going on. My vote is to say it's a mistake to try to model the optimal intelligence of these machines on ourselves, that we should define a form of intelligence that is complementary to the fairly well-known cognitive biases of human decision-making.
Almost like to a certain extent, we kind of we use devices now. I mean, we walk around, and even when I was a kid, we didn't have phones walking around to look up answers to questions we didn't know the answer to right on the spot. But this is, to me, it sounds like what you're suggesting is maybe this is sort of the same type of thing, but at a even a much more sophisticated level. Is that fair?
It is, and one way I like to think about this is if we thought about the original computers, they were room size, air-conditioned, tube-based computational machines in the 1950s. And then DEC came up with a PDP-11, which is sort of a refrigerator-sized computer. And then there was the desktop, and then the laptop, and now the palm-based, hand-based smart telephone. I think we're finding a migration from the room closer and closer to the human, so that ultimately we'll have smart glasses that speak to us and help put an overlay in front of our eyes that explain parts of the environment that we might not correctly understand, and perhaps even ultimately smart contact lenses. So the capacity of us to communicate with a networked intelligence becomes just part of our everyday life. So that when you walk into a room, the clothes you wear and the speech you enunciate identifies you, and increasingly your electromagnetic identity, currently the one you use to pay for things when you put your phone down on the cradle, will be part of you. And evolutionarily, we have eyes to see light and ears to hear sound. Now we'll have the additional capacity to communicate with our environment with electromagnetic waves.
Right. I'm curious, like, what's your, and I know how to ask you this question, although, just because where we're at in this world, but like, what are the things that, other things that you see happening with the future, with quantum computers and with AI, that we're not even thinking about right now for most people? Like what are your dreams in terms of, your vision on this? Because obviously you're a guy who thinks, outside the box, but what are some of those types of things that we're not, let me just give you an example. I'm very involved right now and interested in longevity science. I've been following that. I firmly believe that in the next, 2 to 3 decades, we will have the capacity for human, biological age reversal. I believe that based on the science where we're at right now. And when I say that, people, they think I'm out of my mind. And I'm like, well, look at the Jetsons, go watch the movie, the cartoon, the Jetsons, and all those things we thought were out of our mind. This is where we're at with science. What's the equivalent of that in your world?
Well, you certainly raised an interesting one. One of these notions that computers have moved from a room-sized box to become part of the clothes we wear and the glasses we might wear is whether it will actually move out inside the human body, inside our biological barriers into the brain. You had mentioned Elon Musk. He has a company based in San Francisco called Neuralink, where they are doing just that. They're putting electrodes inside the. Currently, they're working with animals, and I think this is a very promising area for people who have limited capacity with arms and legs, and so we might
like
see
ALS or something like that. Yeah,
assistive technologies where the dangers that are inherent in trying to inject various kinds of electronics into the brain might be justified. I find that kind of scary and icky, and I know some people have basically said that the convergence of machines and humans will end in a singularity where we are ultimately moving in that direction. I think I'll focus on concentrating in the next 50 years or so before that happens, when our technologies are more like our clothes and our tools.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it to you guys to figure out how the singularity works.
Yeah. The singularity. Well, hopefully the medicine part, we can, you'll be around for that too. So the singularity, explain the singularity for people who've never really heard that term. I mean, obviously that's, something that's out there.
The term singularity is used in mathematics and in astrophysics, and it gotten adopted by several of the folks that have been looking at the future of computational intelligence. And the notion is that ultimately, if you keep watching the step of humans and the technologies they invent, we will increasingly have more control over our own bodies, so that rather than aging on a predetermined schedule, we'll determine that schedule ourselves.
Right. So that's interesting. So that really, there is some congruency there, even with the medical, the way the medical world is working right now, and where it's moving towards.
This fellow named Ray Kurzweil, who was a very successful entrepreneur, inventor, and author, has been talking about the coming singularity. He's got a new book coming out. Thought it was going to come out this year. It looks like it may be another year in process before the new version. I don't know if he's going to call it. It's still coming singularity. Yeah. He's estimated the year 2047 at one point. The numbers bounce around a little bit, but it's, in a couple of decades, he sees this predicted convergence. And it's likely to be more gradual. And those that will be taking advantage of age-reversing drugs are likely to be the wealthy elites around the world initially.
Yep.
The ramifications of a race that doesn't die raises some very interesting philosophical questions. My hope, it's not my area of expertise. My hope is you can find some of your colleagues that can address that one. It's something I pay attention to and wonder about, but I'll set that one aside.
Ray Kurzweil is also, I think, he's been incredibly accurate with predictions of the past. More so than I think people realize. I would also suggest people maybe read some of his books. But one of the things that I think that makes him unique is like how quickly he believes that some of these things are going to actually happen, and he's basing them on his own mathematical models. It's not like he's pulling it out of nowhere, right? So when you put some of the things he's predicted, and usually they move up in time, they don't move back. You know what I mean? They're usually going to happen quicker. So Yeah, but
Well,
that's
you've got a sophisticated audience for your podcast and materials. So let's take on a very sophisticated and difficult idea, which is the notion of exponential growth that Kurzweil puts forward. And he basically argues that as the computer figures things out, it will use the fact that it had figured that out to speed up the process of addressing the next question. So because it's multiplicative in its growth, and so the notion is that computers will start reprogramming themselves, so that we're not going to write the next set of instructions for collecting information and the transformer algorithms for the large language models. The computers themselves will be doing that. And this notion of self-programming generates the kinds of predictions that Kurzweil emphasizes of exponential growth. I'm skeptical of that because in order for that process to take place, there has to be information gathering. And you don't just instantly gather all the information. So there are some constraints on exponential growth, especially in the area of large language models. So,
although if you have certain, I guess the question on the information gathering, I guess one of the constraints is if the information is not out there, right? But I guess the point is that you may have the information that you need, and sometimes the real genius is being able to put that information together. And if you're able to do so, for example, going back to the question of the various types of ways that we can attack the problem of human aging, we have a lot of data, right? And maybe the computers are the ones, maybe the AI is what is going to help us put that data together and get us the information quicker than we would do on our own.
What's missing from the way you've characterized it is you need feedback. When you say, I think this particular genetic element is critical in determining lifespan. And so you need a test to see if your identification is true. That's what the modeling says. We've got to look at that particular part of the genome. And it turns out, well, it's not just that part. It's that part connected with another part and another part and another part. And once you've got 4 different elements in different combinations, the capacity to test to see if there's an interaction effect among the 4 requires a lot further data gathering and manipulation, which means you have to move to experimental research rather than just pattern recognition.
Right. In at least I've seen, and I don't know if it's real or not, or if it's, just advertising gimmicks, but even in like A/B testing, for example, like when people are looking at how crowds respond, there's some companies that are claiming that they're using AI to do the A/B testing before it even goes in front of a real human audience. Is that, how do you do that if there's no feedback? Do you just model the feedback?
They may model it, and they may model it correctly, and they may model it incorrectly.
Right. Yeah.
I think assuming that you can guess what the answers are going to be is not science, it's marketing.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I thought in a nutshell. But great. Russ, this has been really a fascinating conversation for me, totally outside of my world, and I'm sure to the world of most every one of my listeners, pretty much. But I do want to thank you for your time, and again, hope the book does well. It's Evolutionary Intelligence: How Technology Will Make Us Smarter. Certainly a book that sounds like it would be a very interesting book to pick up. Russ, thanks again for being on Well Formula Podcast.
Buck, thanks very much.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. And before you go, I do want to remind you that you should, if you have not yet, go to wealthformula.com and check out all the potential resources there that we have for you. In addition, if you are an accredited investor, that you definitely want to sign up for our investor club. That's where you want to be if you're looking for potential deal flow. Now, we are doing some very interesting things this year. Traditionally, we have been, a real estate focused investor group, and we will continue to do that when it's appropriate. The markets are just still frozen. However, this year we've already gotten into commercial aviation, buying airplanes for the likes of British Airways and Air Portugal and American Airlines. We're going to be doing some M&A, mergers and acquisitions, along with Zulfi Ali, who is used to run a sovereign wealth fund in Bahrain. So we've got some seriously heavy hitting kind of stuff coming down the pipe. And if you're interested, you need to join the group. Go to wealthformula.com and sign up for Investor Club. That's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.